Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage, and what we're going to be doing today is replacing the driver's side front axle on the 2004 Honda Pilot. So stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, just want to welcome you here, and hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like what you see. Also, check out Car Apprentice on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I post lots of pictures and videos on those platforms before I post anything on YouTube. And occasionally I'll post things on those platforms I don't post on YouTube. Also, check out the website at carapprentice.com. And don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video. So what we're going to be doing today is replacing the driver's side front axle on the 2004 Honda Pilot. So I've been talking about this popping and clunking noise that I've been hearing, and actually they're not the same noise, they're not related, it appears. It appears that they actually have separate causes. So I took the car for a test drive in a parking lot, drove in a really tight circle, turning to the right, and I did not notice any popping or clunking noise, but I figured I'd just go ahead and replace it and see what would happen here. So I'll just say right up front that replacing the axle did not solve the popping or the clunking noise on this car. But I decided just to go ahead and put this video out anyway because I thought there might be some valuable information in it. So, let's get into it. Alright, so I've got the front end of the Pilot on jack stands with the driver's side wheel off, and I've drained the transmission fluid. So check out the videos on jacking up the front end and replacing the transmission fluid respectively if you're unsure. Next, I'm going to unstake the axle nut so I can remove it. I have a couple screwdrivers, one broken and one that is not. I don't like to use screwdrivers for this job, but I don't have many other options. You'll see in a minute why I prefer to not use one of my good screwdrivers. I just gradually lifted with the screwdriver, then it snapped before I could switch to finishing with the broken one. Yep, broken. That's what I was afraid of. So not a good idea. So I got it part way out here. Let's see if I can get it the rest of the way. Okay, so that should be enough right there. We should be able to go ahead and take this nut off now. One thing to do, possibly, if you have factory wheels, is to take the center cap off your wheel, put your wheel back on the car, put the car on the ground, and then you can break this loose a lot easier with a breaker bar. Alright, so this tab is up now. I'm going to use this axle nut socket. This is a 36 millimeter. And a breaker bar. Let's see if this works here. Should work. Screwdrivers here to keep the rotor from turning. So using your foot is much better than using your hands. It saves your shoulders. And also you have more power, of course, in your legs. There's our piece of screwdriver. It just fell out. So it looks like we have some rust in here. If you can see that, I'll turn the wheel a little bit if I can. See that there? So this could be a little bit of a challenge to get this axle out of this hub. I'll next remove the pin for the ball joint with some vice grip pliers. I should have tried to spread the end of the pin instead of just yanking on it with pliers. Might have come out much easier. Here's some footage from the lower control arm bushing video that shows how I removed the ball joint from the knuckle. To give ourselves a little more room to get the axle out, I'm going to disconnect the stabilizer link from the strut with a 19mm wrench and a 17mm socket. Alright, to get the axle out of the hub, you may have to resort to using a tool like this OEM Tools 27037 puller. It gets mounted with lug nuts, then the screw is turned clockwise to push the axle through the hub. Fortunately, the rust in the hub was just on the surface, so I was able to easily remove the axle. The hardest part of this job is freeing the axle from the transmission. The service manual shows a pry bar as a tool of choice, but strangely there's nowhere to fit it. I'm not sure if it works on other years of the Pilot. I looked at using a slide hammer with a couple different joint pullers as an alternative, but that didn't work too well either. What finally worked very well was a Stanley 15-inch Wonder Bar. I just got the curved end behind the axle joint and quickly popped it loose. To get it out the rest of the way, I placed a block of plywood between the Wonder Bar and the transmission, then just gave it another quick pop. Alright, so let's go ahead and get this out the rest of the way. I'm trying to be really careful about not damaging the seal in there. There we go. Looks pretty good in there. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. Okay, so here's a new axle. It's Import Direct HO8202. Normally I only like to install OEM axles, but I didn't pay attention to the OEM axle I was given at the local salvage yard 45 minutes away, and it turned out to be the axle for the passenger side. If this one starts to vibrate, which is a very common issue with aftermarket axles on Hondas, I'll put the old one back in, since the axle is not the cause of the clunking noise anyway. So checking the compressed length of these axles. Put this one over here. They look fairly similar in length. And the one thing I want to check too is make sure it has the same number of splines. Looks to be pretty much the same. I'm going to count all of them though. And the same thing on this end too. Comparing the two axles, the old axle shaft is just over 27 millimeters in diameter, and the new axle shaft is 2 millimeters smaller at around 25 millimeters. The other specs appear to be as advertised. I added some all-purpose grease to the inboard splines and used a screwdriver to remove the grease at 3 spline intervals. I use some brake cleaner to clean off the inboard joint where it makes contact with the transmission. Then I also clean off the transmission with some brake cleaner. Alright, putting the axle in now. I'm going to come in on this side. Try to get it straight in there. Okay, got it part way in. Try to straighten this out a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's in now. All right, so I have some anti-seize in here. I'm going to quickly get this in there. I don't want this hanging too long on the inner joint. Okay, there we go. This all the way in. Okay, let me get the ball joint back in simultaneously here. There we go. I'm going to start the nut on the ball joint. Alright, so basically what I'm doing right now is just putting all the components back together. I'm not tightening anything down just yet. I just want to see how things look before I do that. So I'm going to put this in up here. Stabilizer link, there's a nut for it. Run that down a little bit. Okay, and then our axle nut, brand new. Put it right here. Okay, let's tighten that down by hand first here. Draw the axle in. There we go. Alright, so far so good. Looks like everything's back on. We just have to tighten all the fasteners down. So we'll do that next. Alright, so I went ahead and did the ball joint. I think you saw me do that in the, I can't remember which, I think it was the lower control arm video where I replaced the bushings. So I'm not going to show that again. I'll show a clip of it though. Alright, so I'm going to lift the car off the jack stands to place this weight on the suspension before tightening the fasteners to spec. And the spec for the 19mm castle nut is 43 to 51 foot-pounds. I didn't have a torque wrench that could fit on the castle nut, so I just tightened it by feel and made sure the holes in the stud were facing forward. I then installed a new split pin. The OEM Honda part number is 90701-S3V-A01. So 19mm back here on the joint, and then you can tighten it on this nut right there. That's 17. Okay, we grab the torque wrench. Okay, so 17mm, 58 foot-pounds. I'm going to tighten the axle nut socket, 36mm and 181 foot-pounds. Screwdriver here. Also, you can do this with the wheel back on. Just take your center cap off, and that way the wheel won't spin. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, so on these large torque specs like that, I like to use my feet instead of using my shoulders and my hands. So just have to take it really slow though. So that's not perfect, but I think that'll be good enough. So typically, like I said, you're supposed to use a tool, like I think it's called a drift. I don't have anything like that, so I just grabbed whatever I had. The last couple things to do are to refill the transmission with fluid. So check out the video on transmission fluid replacement for the Pilot. And then put the wheel back on and tighten the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds with the car on the ground. And that's it. Alright, so there you have it. There's a place in the driver's side front axle on the 2004 Honda Pilot. So that didn't solve our popping or clunking noises, but you got to see a little bit of the procedure for replacing that driver's side axle. In the next video, we're actually going to tackle the clunky noise, so stay tuned for that. And that's probably going to be the last video we're going to do on the Pilot for a little while. We're going to move on to some other stuff and do some other videos. So hopefully this information was helpful, and thanks for watching.